Joining us now, NBC News Washington managing editor Carol Lee. I also want to bring in former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst Paul Butler. Here with me in studio, New York Times national reporter and MSNBC contributor Jeremy Peters. So, Carol, the start of January 1st, 2014, not a random choice, clearly. Walk us through the significance of this timeline and what it covers.
Sure, Chris. It starts in 2014, and that is the year when Hunter Biden joined the board of Burisma, as you were just showing, the Ukrainian energy company that had, while his father was vice president, and that was something that came under very sharp scrutiny by Republicans. And if you then go through the timeline all the way up until December 1st, 2024, what happened during that time is Hunter Biden's business dealings with China were under scrutiny. It's when he did the actions that he was convicted of in terms of the gun charges and the tax evasion. And so all of that together, this is the time frame that has been under the microscope and in the political sphere and attacked by Republicans for years. And so what you're seeing is the president deciding to take that time frame and basically try to inoculate his son from any future investigations that might take place. And if in a new Trump administration, for instance, we know that there was concern that within the president's family and his closest allies that there would be new targeting of Hunter Biden in a second Trump administration. And we also know from our own reporting that the pardon is something that the president actually never really took off the table. He said publicly he wouldn't do it, but our reporting shows that he hadn't ruled this out. And so it was always an option because he was facing potential jail time. And that was something that the president was very concerned about. We know from our own reporting and others that Hunter Biden is a very strong focus for the president, just in terms of how much he thinks about him and worries about him because of his history with addiction. So all of that now has added up to the White House on the defensive over this decision, not just the decision to do it, because it is a reversal, but also the justification that the president is putting out there, this was political and really taking a parting shot at the Justice Department in his final weeks in office.
Yeah, well, something that is putting a lot of Democrats, Jeremy, they feel in an awkward position, to say the least. But it does go beyond the cases, I think, just that obviously Hunter Biden has been prosecuted for. Some of the other things that Republicans have suggested that he should be investigated for. And I did think it was notable in the statement that Joe Biden said as a father and president in that order. He said father
first. Exactly. And this is a father who was worried about his son, who's suffered greatly through addiction, whose sobriety, like anyone's, is always very tenuous. And he did probably what I would say is the least surprising thing of his presidency.
Really?
I saw this coming a mile away. I mean, even though he issued very strong denials, oh, no, it's not on the table. I mean, it just seemed like such a no-brainer, because what was he faced with? Talking about a pardon for a couple days worth of a news cycle, or dealing with his son potentially being the subject of congressional and FBI and Justice Department investigations for years and years to come. This ensures that we won't be dealing with any of that unless, of course, there's something Hunter did that falls outside the scope of this 10 years. But this allows the country to just move on from the Biden family saga, which has been, let's face it, pretty messy. And once Biden leaves office on January 20th, I think we'll probably just move on.
Move on. Paul, even if Republicans still talk about Hunter Biden legally, anything that falls under those dates, he's protected, right? That this is within the purview, not just of this president, but any president to do exactly this.
Yeah, so during the 10-year time expanse, Hunter Biden has a get-out-of-jail-free card, including for crimes that he hasn't been charged with. I think a lot of people can sympathize with Biden as a father. When a family member is locked up, sometimes their loved ones feel like they're doing the time on the outside while the inmate does the time on the inside. But there's a whole process for how someone applies for clemency at the Justice Department. They're supposed to go through the Office of Pardon Attorney, which then does this extensive background check to see if the person has actually expressed remorse and is rehabilitated. And even then, almost nobody actually gets a pardon. So, Chris, President Biden completely circumvented this process, and he's not focused on Hunter's remorse. And he's saying that Hunter should never have been prosecuted in the first place. And as you know, this grant of clemency is extraordinarily broad.
Yeah, President Biden, Paul, as the Washington Post points out, joins a very short list of presidents who have absolved family members. I mean, Donald Trump did pardon Charles Kushner, who is an in-law. Bill Clinton pardoned his half-brother Roger, although both had already served their terms, right? So this was after they had been convicted and they had served their sentence. No net has been cast this wide, except obviously, arguably Nixon, and that was not a family situation. Does this set a precedent? And what does it mean going forward, do you think, potentially?
So if Donald Trump wants to pardon the January 6th defendants who've been convicted in court and are serving time, I think politically this makes it easier for him to do that. If Donald Trump wants to pardon himself for anything that he might be prosecuted for or anything that he might have done, I think this makes it easier for him. Of course, President Biden says the difference with Hunter is that Hunter is the victim of a political prosecution. It's true that the Justice Department technically prosecuted Hunter, but the actual prosecutor, David Weiss, was a holdover from the Trump administration. Merrick Garland made him a special counsel, so he has a lot of authority to prosecute cases as he sees fit. But that does give some credence to President Biden's concerns that his son is being unfairly targeted. The reality is that the gun case that he was charged with, those charges are rarely brought as standalone charges. They usually are accompanied by something more serious. And Hunter paid back his back taxes and any fees and penalties. So the department typically doesn't bring those cases as well. But at the end of the day, Chris, Hunter Biden was convicted in the gun case by a jury of his peers, and he pled guilty in the tax case. So if he really thought he was the victim of selective prosecution, why didn't he try to continue to fight that in court? Some people will say if he knew his daddy could get him off, there wasn't any reason to go through the legal procedure.
Well, Jeremy, Hunter Biden, his pardon stands out for a lot of reasons. One is that, and your paper has written about this, that he has not granted a lot of clemency. Back in September, they wrote, no modern U.S. president, going back to Richard Nixon, has had a clemency rate so low. I wonder if that gives us any insight into what he might do in his last couple of months, or have you heard anything about other potential pardons by Joe Biden before he leaves office?
Well, I think we know from history that these things tend to come at the end of
right.
a term. So in a few weeks, we may know a lot more. I think what this pardon can tell us about the future actually applies not to Joe Biden, but to Donald Trump. And always, I think, Donald Trump was going to issue pardons that were going to be for his political benefit. They were going to be colored by his sense of persecution and the persecution of his followers. So I'm talking about things like the January 6th rioters. He probably was always going to pardon them. Now he's just going to cite the Hunter Biden pardon as an excuse for that. So it makes it a little bit more convenient for him, but I think it probably didn't change anything that Trump was going to do or not do.
Can I just ask a very basic question, Paul, and I'm out of time, but if you're pardoned, does that mean you no longer have a criminal record?
Yes, it does. It means if you're asked, have you ever been convicted of a crime, you can say no. A pardon is different from an expungement. An expungement means the case completely goes away. A pardon means that you acknowledge that you broke the law or could be charged with breaking the law. But in the eyes of the law, it's like you were never charged at all.